Right, South Africa could soon have an additional official language. It comes after an amendment of the Section 6 of the Constitution to recognize South African Sign Language, which has been approved by Cabinet for public comment. It will potentially be the country's 12th official language. For more on this, we are joined now by National Director of DeafSA and Bruno Druchen, and expert in multilingual language policy, Dr. Rakwena Monareng, who joins us in studio. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. It's exciting. I know it's not the first time the conversation around incorporating sign language as a 12th official language has been, underway. It has been an ongoing conversation for a number of years. Talk to us about this development.
It has been a long discussion about this matter. I remember 2017 when I was still the CEO of the Pan South African Language Board. I was requested by the Constitutional Review Committee to come and give a motivation. There were three submissions that were made, one for the sign language, the other one for Sesotho sa Leboa, and then it was for Kilobedu. And the Sesotho sa Leboa and the sign language were given a go-ahead based on the discussion we had. Kilobedu couldn't make it because they didn't have what is called the orthography. Orthography means it's a grammar and style of a language, typifying the kind of grammar that typify a language itself. So the Kilobedu one didn't have it. So the sign language was given a go-ahead, and it was given an approval then. I'm very much elated and happy that the little sweat that we went through in 2017, even beyond that, is now coming to fruition. We've been waiting for this for a long time.
Yeah.
It is much about acknowledging the existence of fellow human beings that are part of ourselves. It gives them the opportunity to be able to converse, speak in signing.
Yeah. The grammatical structure that you speak about, how is it broken down in terms of understanding? Because, I mean, if you don't know, you're just listening to the audio, but you don't understand the structure of sign language.
Let me take you a bit on how when I talk about the grammatical structure. A little soul get born in a family, listens to the input from the parents and everybody surrounding him. That person constructs a language, not a language but a system of language that will be able to help him to generate a finite set of sentences that will obviously regard in him being able to speak. So when you are signing, you're basically speaking. You are getting used to the type of sign that typifies a particular meaning that you want to convey, and then it becomes a common way of speaking. So signage or signing basically has got its own dialects, various dialects, because people are grown from different places, different environment. It's not influenced by Sesotho, Xitsonga, Tshivenda. It's about signing. So they are speaking in a uniquely different way than we who are using the audio voices to speak among ourselves.
I also understand that it will be incorporated as an option in the school curriculum. I mean, that must be exciting in terms of the many benefits.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. We had a launch, I think it was 2019, where I also participated, in which the Department of Education was recognizing that as a matric subject to be written by almost everybody. But what is very much important, Mwakuba, is that all of us should have ownership of that language. Yeah. As much as it is the one that is used by them to sign, it is our own language. We are obliged, maybe obliged is a nice word, we are compelled to make sure that we know so that we can be able to talk to them. The importance of language is I don't know how to put it, but it is critical. It's critical because it helps you to think.
Yeah, absolutely.
You think better, you communicate better with yourself, you communicate with the environment around you. Now you start to explore the world. and try to locate yourself within the world. And as you communicate with them, you become part of human beings. You become part of the species that are able to use their brain to speak.
Absolutely, that's really fascinating. Let's bring in the conversation Director of DeafSA, Bruno Druchen. A very good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Monareng is speaking about the color within language, the opportunities and expansion and the power of language. How significant is this move?
Thank you for Newzroom Afrika for allowing us to be part of this. We started lobbying for South African Sign Language since 2007. 2017 actually came later. So DeafSA was the only organization that really represented South Africa and is still representing all the deaf community members in South Africa. So we submitted a submission to Parliament for a constitutional amendment in 2007 because we said all the other languages have their official status, and then in Africa we've got Uganda Sign Language, we've got Kenyan Sign Language, and South Africa wanted the same for South Africa to be also an official language, because in other African countries it is already sign language and official language in these respective countries. So if they ask us, is it a real language, is it a monkey language? So we worked with the University of Wits to come up with evidence that it is really a language on its own, with its own grammatical structure, and with all those evidence, we then put forward to Parliament as well, so in order for them to understand. So we've needed to put forward evidence, and then also ask that parents of deaf children also need to sign from a very early age for them to acquire the language from a very early age. So since we say South African Sign Language, we do not say Zulu Sign Language, Xhosa language, because that was done more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because of the transformation that happened in South Africa, the deaf community also transformed and our language confirmed. And that's why when apartheid ended, we integrated, so events were held where deaf people were allowed then to socialize, and then so everybody then used sign language. So that's why we call it South African Sign Language, because everybody understands it in the deaf community. So Parliament approved it after we explained it to them. We made various submissions to Parliament. We also informed Parliament that we do have 3 universities that offers that as a course at the universities up to MA level. So, and that we also then can also communicate abroad with deaf people abroad, because there's an international sign system in place. So we want our language to be an equal language to the other spoken languages in South Africa. The deaf community in South Africa is part of the community of South Africa, and we can communicate with deaf people and with the community if there is interpreters. So yes, there is dialects, like Mr. Monareng said, but in Cape Town they sign mother like this. In Johannesburg they sign mother like this. But because of that dialect, we identify those dialects, but we do not criticize it. Because if you speak Afrikaans and also English, when people speak Afrikaans in Cape Town, especially in the colored communities, do they speak the same as the hearing people speaking Afrikaans community in Pretoria? No, they don't use the language the same, but it's still Afrikaans. So we say that English is standardized? English is not standardized. It's an evolving language still today. So the same applies for South African Sign Language. So that's why we call this South African Sign Language. And it's important for everybody to be aware.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'd like for you to hold the thought because the conversation does continue, a rather fascinating one, especially when it comes to understanding the different dialects within the sign language, South African Sign Language, the diversity of it. We continue this conversation. National Director of DeafSA, Bruno Druchen, as well as expert in multilingual language policy, Dr. Rakwena, who is in studio as we expand on some of the other elements of this conversation. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us on News at Prime. We do continue our conversation with the National Director of DeafSA, Bruno Druchen, and expert in multilingual language policy, Dr. Rakwena Monareng, on the approval of sign language as the 12th official South African language. It really is a fascinating conversation, especially as we speak about the different dialects. I mean, we heard Druchen speaking about how the dialect is identified but not criticized. I mean, you know, I would imagine if you're speaking Xitsonga from Bushbuckridge and Xitsonga from Giyani, there must be some level of criticism on how you may not be pronouncing a refined language, as you know, because of the recognition of textbook Xitsonga and the other dialect, which is a mixture of the other languages.
You know, what we need to take into account is that the conceptualization of the concept language categorization from a dialect into official language is something that we inherited from the Eurocentric perspective. In African concept, the language is associated with the king. Each and every king would have a particular language that he speaks. If it is Xitsonga, Maamhlaba will speak a language. Then if it is people coming from Baanguna, coming from Bushbuckridge, will speak another language. They are related to Xitsonga. So they've been classified as Xitsonga because what happens is that you pick up from all different dialects and you construct a system that represents all the languages. And that becomes what is called the official language. And that is what I call an artificial language, because it's designed to function at a given platform. Me and you now are speaking English, and we're using the standardized version. We are speaking that using the standardized version, even if when we write, we use the standardized version for intelligibility, so that we can write the same way for us to understand. But the real language in African senses are those that the European sense will call them dialect. So that's where it's come from. So what Ndade is talking about is very true. People coming from different areas, using different kind of sign languages, those are the representation of dialects in the European sense, but not in the African sense.
Yeah.
In the African sense, it's a word. It's a language. It's a complete language. But then the construction of official languages, that's where we pick up all those grammatical stuff and we put them together. We come with the text that I refer to as orthography. So we say we speak like this in an official platform when we sign. We sign like this, and this become an international language. Everybody understands that because there's an intelligibility there. So that's what is happening. But all of it comes from the bottom that we refer to as dialect, and that I refer to as languages. I speak Sesotho sa Leboa as my official standard language, but I speak Kitavini, which is one of the dialects. Basically, it is Setswapo, which is linked to the languages that is in Botswana. That is my language, it's not my dialect.
Yes.
But the way it's categorized, it's referred to as a dialect, because I can't write in that, and then in the classroom they will not allow me to do that. So when we talk about conceptualization, putting all these things together to form standard language, we should also understand that we are artificializing the real languages, but we're using that for a given purpose, which is for us to be able to speak and be intelligible.
Absolutely, and that is really the essence of it all.
Yeah.
As we speak about inclusion, I mean, the issue of the parent came up. I mean, you make mention of how it's going to be incorporated into the school structure. It can be an option for learners, also university level. What about the parents' involvement? Where does it all begin as you try and communicate with your child?
Language is something automatic, spontaneous. When you've got the child that is unable to use the audio system to communicate with you, you start by signing. When the little infant is born, the first kind of language you speak to her is signing, and it's murmuring, is cooing, and all the cooing, and all these things. So you will develop in the house a way of trying to communicate with that person. And as you develop, everybody in the house should make it their effort, spontaneously, automatically, that they need to talk to that person. Remember, when we talk to the person with the ability to sign only as a way of communication, we are making that person to feel that he belongs or she belongs. Mm-hmm. She is a person. She's got intellect, and she can be able to express that intellect and use it like any other way. The only difference is that that person speaks and makes sense differently from us, but it's the same sense that we all are making. The representation of the world for them is not a T, a P, a Q. It is not a va, they, and v, and o. It is their sign, and they know how they mix them to be able to make sense of the world. For example, if they want to say Ngwakuba is beautiful, they are not going to say Ngwakuba is beautiful. They are going to show through signing, and that signing will capture the essence of beauty, and it will use the diction, the choice of words, the vocabulary that is captured in signing. I am using the vocabulary captured in audio expression of my voice. Yeah. So they will also do that. So that is the recognition that we need to take. And the issue of them being able to make sense, which is, this one is very key, because it's much about education. Yeah. It's much about teaching them. It's much about teaching them how to understand what is being taught to them. So the ability to pick up that vocabulary and the provision of the standardized form helps them to progress well. I was impressed when my colleague said that there are universities, which I know, that are kind of giving these courses even up until to a doctoral degree. Wow. So that tells you that education is not about the audio side. It's not about the graphic symbols. It's about any way of representation that you can use to make sure that you progress well. That is very key. It really is. I'm in conversation here with Dr. Monareng, as well as a few minutes ago, of course, we lost the Director of DeafSA, Bruno Druchen, and we are trying to get hold of him. But my conversation with the expert in multilingual language policy, Dr. Rakwena Monareng, continues in studio. As you speak about this so passionately, I mean, it makes me want to go sign up and also learn how to work with sign language. But perhaps it does away with the stigma, this recognition, placing this language as an official language, doing away with the stigma, because stigma speaks to a lack of understanding, a lack of education. You're very right. It deals with the stigma that this cannot speak, so we must ignore him. We must ignore his needs. We must ignore his dream and his imagination. Therefore, it's a subhuman. When you recognize that in a constitution, which is the highest law of the country, you're giving that person an oomph, the presence, the power, the authority to assert himself as a human being fully. That is very much important, because without giving that kind of assertion, that person will always feel very little. And the Constitution does that quite well for us. The fact that also the school system is allowing this thing to take place, it's again another important point that we need to consider, because it's offering sense-making in the process of learning. So that is very much important.
I suppose the opportunities within perhaps the job market are also endless when it comes to trying and going into this profession, I suppose. It
is. So now we've got somebody who's signing for us. Is it not job creation?
Yeah.
And when he signs for us, basically it's going to improve. And the more we hire people being able to sign for us, the more we're making this thing a natural phenomenon that we must do. And you know what is important? It is that we are creating or giving cachet or value to the language itself. And value is not only about ordinary value. You know that these days we talk about value, we also include money. And we give the financial value to the language itself. Creating job, creating space for people to learn, and having a television station in future. Me and you must dream about this thing. A television station in future that is going to exclusively deal with signing. How sweet is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what it's going to do? The more it gets audience, the more everybody in the country will be compelled. I'm not using the nice word as obliged or kind of perforating problem as challenges. We are going to be compelled by nature and by the presence of this medium to be able to learn this language, participate in the discussion, and be able to get into their thinking. And I'm saying there, not in a derogatory way, but because lots of time, most of the time, the people who are signing were put aside.
Yeah.
And if we give them that platform, we need to give them three important things. Political investment, ideological investment, and financial investment, so that this station that I'm talking about happens.
Yeah, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for weighing in on this very important discussion. Certainly an eye-opener. You know, as we started the conversation, we started with the National Director of DeafSA, Bruno, Druchen, and we unfortunately lost him. But wrapping up with the expert in multilingual language policy, Dr. Rakwena Monareng, on the approval of sign language as the 12th official South African language.